One, two, three.
Great.
It's Simon
And Tamila.
here from Harmonize. And we're in the midst of our Building Conflict Resilient Organizations course right now, which is 4 hour and a half long sessions about how to build organizations that are capable of unlocking the transformative potential that's hidden within conflict, as well as remaining functional inside of its presence. And as part of that course, we are doing these supplementary videos where we answer questions and go deeper on things that people inside of the course wanted, and use this as an opportunity to share out with people outside of the course what is going on and what they could learn if they join us for the next one.
Mhm.
So on the first course, we talked about things like mapping conflicts along the 8 different layers of human relationships: personal, interpersonal, organizational, systemic, ideological, world, all and source dynamics, and how all of that plays out inside of our conflicts. And we also talked about understanding the roots of conflict as when discord is created from an imbalance of power, belonging, and justice. So most times when we have conflict, there's some issue of power dynamics, there's some issue of belonging, who's in and who's out, there's some issue of justice, who's getting hit in what way by what. And one of the things that we heard from the participants in the course is they appreciated us putting ourselves on blast and talking about our own conflicts and how we've used these tools to understand and move through our own conflicts. So that is what we're here to do, Tamila. We're here to talk about when we fight with each other and what we do about it.
Which thankfully doesn't have to happen often. And we work through it well because
Yeah,
of the tools.
because of the tool.
Okay,
I
so
believe our so we're gonna talk about, we're going to use one of our conflicts to talk about the nested layers, how we understood our conflict in terms of the nested layers, how we understood it in terms of power, belonging, and justice, and what we did with it. So do you want to tell the people what we fought about most recently?
sure. Okay, first, we should give a little context. So, Simon and I are business partners, which basically means we're life partners. And so, we're trying to create, obviously, a sustainable economic model. And as entrepreneurs, there's obviously a portion as you're scaling up, determining like how much we're going to be paid and how much we're going to put back into the business and what we're thinking about in terms of years down the line, what growth looks like. And so I recently came to Simon and I was like, I've been looking at my own personal budget numbers and I'm going to need a little more money. I feel like that's what I need for my position. And so we had to have a conversation about if that's
What?
possible, what that looks like. Simon had his own feelings about it.
We had feelings about money.
Mhm.
And because it was us, right, we also, those feelings about money were also wrapped up in feelings about race and feelings about class and feelings about existence inside of capitalism and feelings about our relative contributions and roles in the business that we were creating.
Shocking. You wouldn't think those things are involved in
No, they
discussion,
never come,
but that never comes up.
never. So I think maybe just to explain it, maybe we can start with the nested layers
Mhm.
and talk about, well, what was happening? What happened in this moment where Tamila was like, yo, we need to talk about getting me paid more.
Mhm.
So maybe let's just go personal level. So the personal level to start with is like, what is happening inside of each of us as independent individuals? What are our life journeys about in that moment? And how might that impact this moment where she brought that? I felt a whole bunch of feelings. It got a little weird for a second. We had a conversation. It didn't really feel great. We left. It didn't really feel great. We had to kind of revisit it the next day to polish it up and keep moving. But what was happening on that individual layer for you when you were doing that?
For me, I think something that I have been working through internally is my inclination for self-sacrifice and like being uncomfortable. And it's like, we need to do these things, and I'll be the first one to like take a hit and not ask to have my own needs fulfilled. And so I was dealing with the anxiety around that, but also committed to standing in my own agency because I have a little bit of imposter syndrome as a Black woman. And so there's the idea of like really having to stand in the no, I'm a partner here too. And we're going to have conversations like this is my money too. Let's figure out where it's going to go. I have needs. And so I was, trying to put my big girl pants on and come to the table and stand in my own power.
Cool. And yeah, I heard in that foreshadowing of the power and belonging and justice thing, right? Standing in your own power, legitimizing your own needs. And then I'm also here. I'm a business partner here too. I'm a member of the in group and I get to exert power over what happens in the in group and I get to get the benefits of the in group too. That's all happening on that individual layer.
And I felt a good enough, like a strong sense of belonging to be able to come to the conversation and have it with you. Like there was no fear around that. It was all like my internal insecurities on that layer. Nothing for me.
Yeah, that's also a fun little distinction, right? Like it's belonging all inside of that personal layer.
Mhm.
And you thought of the intervention on belonging was a personal layer. I as Tamila need to tend to that. I don't need to change Simon or change the relationship or change the organization or change the system in order to feel that. That's actually, I've identified that inside of yourself. That's cool.
What was up for you on your personal layer?
Oh, nothing. I was totally fine. I don't talk about nothing. I'm just
Ooh,
fucking
ooh.
chilling. Yeah, cool. For me, right, when you communicated it, I went into like a little bit of a freeze and a withdrawal, right? And it was in because it resonated with me in the sense of like, oh my gosh, I have an obligation now. Right?
Mm,
You've asked for something, and that means that I have to do something to meet that.
mm,
That I don't get to actually have a boundary, which means so all of my things were like, oh my gosh, I have to do this, which made me also then feel a little like put upon and
mm,
victimized. It was like this, like, oh my gosh, I have to carry the weight of the world. I have to do this. Woe is me. But honestly, like underneath that is a sense of like, well, I'm the one in charge, right? It's built, the sense of victimization is actually built from a sense of over entitlement. Because it's
mm,
like, well, obviously it's me, right? Obviously it's so all of that happened. So in my moment, I had to like release that and be
mm,
like, okay, well, there's clearly some way of me relating to the situation that isn't cool for me, right? If I don't want to fall into this pattern that I've done before, which is like also actually overextension and self-sacrifice and caring for other people and that whole thing. I don't want to do that.
mm,
And I feel like this moment is inviting me to possibly do that. So my internal work in the moment was to recognize like Tamila is not doing that to me.
mhm,
The moment is creating an opportunity for me to either do that to myself
mm,
or to make a different choice.
mhm,
But in that moment, I was like, I froze and I kind of went into these different other reactions that like I think Pete's worth saying was like part of the way I went through that was like looking at Tamil and basically being like, do you really need more money? Like I had an impulse to challenge her own self-statement about what she needed in her life
mm,
because I didn't want to take the responsibility on myself. So I did that for a second and I kind of had to pull it back
mm,
and realize, no, I'm aligned with her needs and I trust her articulation of them. There's just something that I need, some way I need to learn how to relate to that works for me. So that was what was kind of happening on like a personal
mhm.
level.
And so then I feel like that's a great segue into the interpersonal level, right? Because that's what's going on inside of each of us, but we're in this conversation, having it with each other in a clear, like interpersonal interaction. And I felt like I was feeling the things that you were feeling. I was like, okay, I can feel Simon's a little activated, like something's going on over there. And then I'm trying to like read it and trying to process like how much of this is about me, how much of this am I going to respond to, how much of this is like Simon's own internal thing that he's working through. And I think there's something also important to note is that we're balancing all of these things at the same time. Because I just heard you say, right, that you didn't want to, you found yourself asking me, do you need this money? and then feeling like you shouldn't. But I think there's also a part of it where I felt like, no, part of me does need to explain. Like I want to explain. I feel like I have a responsibility to manage my own money well. Right. And I want to make sure that it's like, it's not just because I'm out here, buying $5,000 bags or something like that. It's like, I need, I have a need. And so I didn't feel any type of way about you asking that.
Yeah. That was
Mhm,
the whole thing, right? How should I left the conversation being like, should I gone farther? Should I gone less far? It was just like a
mhm,
tender thing. But what do you think was happening also like on the interpersonal level? I think the part of the interpersonal that I was aware of was like the moment you right when you came and said, this is what I want,
mhm,
this is what I need, I was fully wanting you to get what you wanted and what you needed, right? Our like the interpersonally, it was like I'm just rooting for Tamila. Like
mhm,
I'm really rooting for Tamila to get what Tamila says. How do I then relate to it? And I think we've negotiated so many different things before, and we've had conversations about how our kind of race, class, genders impact our relationship to money and the way that we do that inside of our business that I didn't I felt free enough to be able to communicate all of the different things that were happening for me and not worried that I was going to not worried that the imposition to kind of enter this, you are these identities, therefore you must do these prescriptive things no matter how they impact you. I wasn't worried that that was going to get put on me from you. I
mhm.
put it on myself a little, but I wasn't worried that it was going to happen, or I wasn't worried that me trying to break against that to actually be more authentic and vulnerable was going to disrupt our interpersonal dynamic. So I felt very spacious in order to be able to be like,
Yeah.
here's all the things that are happening.
The trust is a huge thing on the interpersonal layer for us. And I feel like I have so much trust for you and so much of a sense of belonging that it was like it's easier to ride the thing because any blip that we have in the moment, like I trust that it's arising out of some sort of miscommunication or an area that needs more clarification or just my own like, oh, we're having like it's a tender conversation, right? So you have to like move slowly, but I never felt like I never feel scared or like you're gonna put something on me or like you're judging me in a particular way. So that allows me to show up to the moment better.
I also feel like there's like this justice and analysis piece that like helps grow the trust,
Mhm,
right? And we also talk often about these 10 dimensions of organization, right? Your cosmology and your analysis of the world and your place inside of it. I think we've had so many conversations about justice and economic equity and capitalism and all of these things that when the rubber meets the road and we're negotiating about something that's even like a scarce resource allocation question, that we can hit the nuance of it. And
mhm,
if it needs to be about race, we can make it about race. And if it needs to be about gender, we can make it about gender. But it isn't. There's a lot of precisions. Like if we're not going to do something that breaks these sense of justice that we've established and we've talked about it enough, but we're also not going to like oversimplify into
mhm.
like
It's like you're a white guy
you're a white guy, therefore blah blah blah. It's like, oh,
and I'm black, so pay me more. Like just no.
yeah, there's a lot more. But I think that allows us to then when we go there, I don't feel either of us on an interpersonal level being defensive or
Mm,
being prickly or gaming it. It's like, cool, this is complicated. We both have a kind of shared understanding of what the solution looks like and feels like.
yeah.
Neither of us know exactly what it is. So like, what you
Mhm,
got?
mhm. And if something feels like a relevant variable, we can bring it to the table, um, even if it's race or if it's not.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything else on the interpersonal before we move to awards?
I love you so much.
Right. That's how I feel
Oh
like.
my gosh. Okay. This is what conflict resilience looks like. Talking about that time we fought about money. All
Yeah.
right. Organizational level.
but it wasn't even a fight.
Actually,
So
let's slow down there. Actually, on the it wasn't even a fight,
mhm,
right? Because it was a conflict, right? It
mhm,
wasn't we didn't fight it out, but underneath, right? What was happening underneath? The conversation progressed in a way that it was clear we didn't have a resolution. It was clear that something wasn't really working about the setup as a whole and the way that we had currently been thinking and orienting toward the setup. And it was getting to the place where now there was a need that was expressing itself. Tamila needs more money. And it was resonating with me in a way that was like, I don't know what to do. Like, we're not doing it. Right. So the conflict wasn't, but it was did reveal this piece of discord, and then that allowed us to go deeper. And I think that's a good transition to the organizational level. Like on the organizational level, it wasn't just that there's a money issue, it's what is going on
mhm,
really here that is creating both the money issue and the way we experienced our entry into navigating it together.
mhm, mhm. Gosh, okay. I'll lay out some of the things I was tracking on the org level and then you can add.
Okay.
So we're obviously in this space of like scale and growing, right? And we're trying to purposefully um narrow and limit the amount of time that we're trying to balance the time that we spend with clients and the time that we spend like scaling up and creating courses and doing all of that, and that obviously requires some moving of the financial pieces. And so there was a concern about that, right? Like we've got long-term goals, we've got specific plans that we're trying to reach, and this is the budget, and this is how we've been thinking about it. And truly taking $2,000 more a month and putting it on my table, that might not be feasible. And I had like we're obviously operating from a space of care for the organization as well. So there was that financial aspect. I think there was also the aspect of us trying to figure out, right, the division of labor in terms of strategy, right? And who's holding that. Because I think there are aspects in how like you had obviously taken the reins and created space to like put together like a particular strategy. And like that's what we were focusing on because I'm very much that person who's like, all right, let's move the strategy forward. But then that limited power inside of the organizational level where like maybe I didn't feel the agency, like where's the space where I'm creating inside of the organization, and what is it that I'm moving forward and what is it that I'm owning.
Yeah.
Does that seem right?
That feels right to me. I think that power thing is still unresolved. We're still trying to figure it out. It came up in our conversation
Mhm.
yesterday about how to move things forward.
I
Because I
think we
think,
got a good idea.
yeah, coming soon. It is a good idea. The fruits of this conflict coming soon to near you. Um, but I think like just to like tease it out even more, right? We were in a moment months ago as an organization where our absence of a clear and articulated strategy was really hard for us to set priorities, and the absence of it actually created a lot of conflicts, because we tried to go too shared. We're all sharing, we're all doing it, but whatever, and we're all deferring to each other. It's like that actually created a field of conflict and unclarity that didn't work. And out of that, we chose to take a step forward, which is like, actually, Simon, it's your job now to figure out how to articulate the kind of the be the central point person about an overall strategy. And then that actually really worked
It was
for a while, and like is still working in a certain area, right? Where the fact that we have that power dynamic in that location of like sign, and it's a power dynamic, but it's also just a labor delegation dynamic. Actually, I think it's first and foremost a labor delegation that comes with a particular power, but we choose not to project too much power issues onto it. It's fundamentally, that's your job, go do your job. And then realizing like, oh, that actually was really successful and actually allowed more emergence and more collaboration when it was just Simon's job to do it. But then it got to a place where it's like, oh, we see that that isn't totally working
Mhm.
here. So how do we keep that labor delegation dynamic there, but change it ever so slightly or as significantly as it needs to, but
Mhm.
not losing that, but then increasing your ability to do what you wanted to do. And I don't think we mentioned this because like one of the things that we identified on the organizational layer was that if I had too much control over the strategy and the priorities, then it would not naturally respond to Tamila's personal need,
Mhm.
and that Tamila would not have the agency to shift and strategize creatively to meet her own need because I would be strategizing. So it's
Mhm.
like, where is the space for Tamila to proactively strategize to meet her own
Mhm.
personal need? Even though the organizational need, on a certain sense, it was cool to have me lead that, it left the personal
Mhm.
agency to tend to your own needs and the personal power like weird and wonky.
And I think it was exacerbated because maybe this is the shadow of the deep trust that we have in each other. It's like once we've delegated it, like I don't even want to think about it. Like Simon's doing the strategy thing. He'll let me know what I need to know when I need to know it. And I think that just the communication breakdown of like me being in those moments, I think that was or not in those moments, I think was probably
Well, I
it
think that's actually that I think that probably also impacted my personal experience, right, on an
Mhm.
individual layer. Because one of the things that hit me was like, that shit's totally happened. Because one of the things that hit me was, damn it, Tamila, I've thought about the next year with such precision, and so I've thought about it so clearly, and I think we're on. And I thought we were locked in about what we were doing. And what did you just say? You just like at the end of a meeting, we're like, I'm gonna need a couple more grand a month. I was like, we just had our budget meeting last week. What are you doing to me? So I think that's also why I felt put upon, like on an
Mhm.
individual level. And then also on an organizational level, it's like we don't have a rhythm of
Having those.
whatever our rhythm of
Mhm.
reflection on that level made it such that you were just like, I thought about this yesterday and I need to say it.
Well, I've been thinking about it for longer than that. And what I did not communicate super well is that I was just trying to raise a flag that at some point I will. Like I was trying to start the conversation, not have you experience like, give me the loot. Like it was
I didn't feel like, all right. Systems level.
yeah,
Give me the systems level. What was happening?
capitalism
Oh, love it, love it, love it. Capitalism.
tearing my life up. Inflation is wild. I live, well, no, that's more of a world thing. Me living in California and you living somewhere. We'll get to that later.
I think systems level like inflation feels like super real, right? Increasing cost of living is
Mhm.
happening, and those are inside of systemic dynamics that are not inside of the control of the two of us. Those are things that we are just trying to navigate.
Mhm. And then there's, I think, also a class dynamic wherein Simon and I come from different socioeconomic backgrounds. And so the feeling of there's an acute fear for me where it's like if I don't get these paychecks, I don't get paychecks. Like I won't have any funds. Um and so I think that that definitely implicates the feelings and the vibes around it, at least for me.
Yeah, and the like, right, and I think it hits right. All that also hits us in terms of like when we do the paychecks, right? If I get my paycheck 2 days late, I'm actually fine. If you get your paycheck 2 days late, like auto bill pay doesn't work. It's like not cool. Right. So, and I think that system, like the systems level, is also impacting and also cascades down in terms of like, well, what are we trying to solve for here in terms of our paychecks, right? How
Mhm,
much do we actually need in order as individuals to draw from this business,
mhm,
to draw from this organization, in order to exist inside of this system that'll enable us to keep going. So we're solving for different things, and we're at different levels of urgency and risk too. Because sometimes I'm like, well, there's been times where like, well, if the business crashes, like I'm gonna be okay for a minute. I'm gonna need to go figure out how to get a job. Um, but I'll be all right for a second. Whereas I think there's an increased layer of that. But I
Mhm,
think another thing that's interesting is like we don't when we talk about organizationally how to pay ourselves,
mhm,
we don't we talk about more than just the systems level. Right? We talk there's conversations about reparations and there's conversations about kind of equity, and there's also conversations about relative like contributions of work and types of work and the different values and different things that we're bringing in, reasons why someone would feel good to be paid. And actually there's been a number of times where I've made started to make suggestions to pay myself less, and
resource.
you're like, what are you doing?
Absolutely not.
That's fucking
Absolutely
nonsense.
not.
Right? But on a systems level, if we were only attuned to a systems level and that was all we were doing, it would make sense. But I think you're spotting accurately that on a personal level, it wouldn't work. And on an interpersonal level, it wouldn't work. And also on an ideological level, it's like that's not
Yeah.
no, you shouldn't be inside of that ideology, Simon, because of the impact that it starts to have
Mhm,
on you, even though systemically that might actually be a
mhm,
reason.
mhm, mhm. I think the system thing also comes into play because, frankly, we are trying to have an impact on the systems level, and our care and passion around what's occurring there, I think also impacts how I think about being in the organization and how much I get paid. Like, I could easily go get a job somewhere and be paid $500,000 a year. Like, I could do that. But I choose not to because I want to have this particular impact on the system. And I feel like I want to do that inside of Harmonize. And I feel like that is the space for that. And so that's also something that I'm thinking about when I'm trying to navigate my own position inside the
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah, and the system, like the desire to make the impact on the systems, also I think motivates us sometimes to pay ourselves more, right? Because it's like we want this to be sustainable enough so
Mhm,
that we can continue doing it, and we actually want to force ourselves to be in a model where anybody who comes in also can do it sustainably because we recognize or we think that in being inside of a model where you're getting paid $40,000 a year to do deep systemic change work actually isn't going to be the mechanism at large that's going to enable us to do that systems change work
mhm,
until, of course, we are paying ourselves less in terms of American dollars because there's other forms of bartering because we have collective healthcare systems and land systems and food systems and bartering, and we're a little bit more outside of the American dollar, that way we're less reliant on it. But as long as we're inside of it, we kind of have this very realistic sense of like uh, we're not going to be able to be effective at systems change if we can't be okay inside of the existing system at this particular time. And I think there's a lot of different ways that people analyze that and orient toward that. And that's just kind of the way that we've thought
mhm.
about. But that's kind of how the system, where the system is looming when we
Yeah.
sit and talk about
And now
conflict.
that we're talking about it, I can see the way that what's happening on the systems level created part of the conflict for us because part of our financial model is trying to think about bringing in more support and paying those people what it is that they deserve, like a livable wage to do that work, but also still sustaining a business model. Listen, y'all, the government is not making it easy. Like it is, there's a lot to do there. And so, and then we're balancing the amount of work then that each of us individually do. Like how many roles can I play? And then what do I need to make that sustainable? Because right, we want to make sure that if we're bringing other people in, we're able to pay them that wage. And if we're not in a position to do that yet, then what do we do?
Okay. Pretty simple.
Yeah.
So we look at the personal, interpersonal, organizational, systemic, what's happening kind of ideologically.
I got you start.
I think we nodded to it. I don't think we need to go too far in there, right? Because the ideology that we actually were able to inhabit was one of significant nuance,
Mhm,
right? Identity, race, class, gender, systems placement mattered,
mhm,
but ultimately was not the only thing that mattered.
mhm,
And there was also So we're inside of that. We're also inside of an ideology, like a particular willingness to want and pursue certain levels of abundance and comfort using capitalist systems, right? We didn't go Gandhi about this thing. We weren't like, well, the issue is that we're drawing money at all, so everybody's an ascetic. Like, we actually didn't go inside of
Mhm.
that ideology. There was a like, I want to be like, I want to be able to have decent things and nice things and have some level of comfort in order to be able to do that. We're inside of that kind of um that ideology. And I think we're inside of a like feeling that money is a legitimate way mode of reciprocity. Actually, we're inside of like, you work, like we're able to say things like, you are working really hard and doing all of these different things, therefore it makes sense to reciprocate that effort with American dollars that you can then use to do things that you then receive energy from. You're putting this much energy, this much energy out. American dollars are a way for you to receive more energy back. That is a legitimate way of orienting toward dollars and reciprocation. And of
Mhm.
course, like, that's not our ideal way. That's not the way that, like, in the vision of the world that we want to see, that's not what we're doing. But we're also inside of an ideology that was engaging with the present, engaging with limits of the present, as opposed to with some limits of the present, as opposed to trying to push beyond them into some like utopian state immediately. So those are some of the kind of like larger ways of thinking and ways of orienting that we're operating as we were doing it. And I think that the fact that we were inside of those levels of agreements actually allowed us to then focus on organizational things, because
Mhm.
we didn't pop off into a conflict about whether we should both be ascetics. And we
Yeah.
didn't pop off into a conversation about like, are you allowed to feel like you
Mhm.
deserve money for your work? Like,
Mhm.
we didn't do that. We had enough shared there. And I think as far as like conflict resilience goes, we would have been just as resilient as an organization and individuals and relationship if we had been, let's do ascetic. If we had known that that's how we were doing it, we would have been able to do it. But it was the fact that we had negotiated that ideologically so much beforehand that we understood kind of how to talk to each other, and we didn't descend into any of those arguments. We were like, let's solve a tactical problem. Let's not negotiate the
Mhm.
meaning of the American dollar.
Yeah, and we were also able to avoid, right, arguments around like race or gender, right? We didn't get into a space of like, well, this is really about the fact that like you don't respect my needs as a Black woman because you're a white guy, or because of like your class background, you don't understand what my needs are. And I feel like you asking these questions we didn't get into that space because we had like a common shared analysis and understanding, so like the conflict doesn't pop off or go into non-relevant spaces. And if it was relevant, I'm positive we could have spoken about it, but it was also helpful to recognize that that's not where we needed to go in that moment.
Yeah, I think that's huge too. I like the like, because when I like then I think that's what was happening when I came and was like, do you really need that money? Right. When I had that, it didn't, it's uncomfortable
Mhm.
conversation to have, and we could continue having it, right? We could go farther into what do I need? What does anybody need? What's really going on? We could go farther. But the question, like me bringing it, it seemed like it was because we were aligned ideologically enough about when is race and gender particularly relevant and salient, and in using it to interpret a behavior.
Mhm.
Because we're aligned on that, then when I was like, yo, do you really need that money? You didn't seem to receive on interpersonally, you didn't seem to receive it as,
Not this white guy asking me what I'm
it
doing.
was, you seem to receive it as like, oh, okay, that's legit, right? It's legit. Like, the way I budget my personal thing and then estimate my need actually does have an impact on our shared space. So like, yeah, I guess let's actually see if this is here. So it was uncomfortable, but we were able to locate the site of uncomfortability appropriately, which is like, it's just tender to talk about money and needs.
Yeah.
and that like it would feel weird no matter what. And we didn't get to a place where it was where race or gender was a thing that seemed to be relevant.
Also,
In that,
partially, I think because you acknowledged that before you even asked. You were like, this might be a lot. This might be across the line. I know it's Tinder, but like, I'm gonna, I was like, okay, yeah. And so we're
yeah,
both tracking it together, like naming the thing.
yeah,
Really.
that's a pro tip that I often give people about talking to people about something. If you're going to cross a line, you think you're going to cross a line, just be like, I think I'm going to cross a line right now. There's a line that's right here. I think I'm going to cross it. Here's why I'm going to cross it. You tell me to get back on the other side of the line if you need to. But
Yes.
like, I got to go see, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
on a
Okay.
world level. Physical reality and all of Earth's inhabitants. What was happening, Tamila?
Yeah. I think I live in California, baby, and the cost of living over here is a lot different than than other places. Um, and I think
Yeah.
that um I think there's also, and I'm not sure if this goes in the world spot. You let me know. What do you think? There's also a community of people that like I'm also responsible for financially in some ways. And so that creates um a level of need as well. But I know you also got you got a whole team over there too.
We're
Um
doing it.
and then and then there's the people that we employ at our organization, right? And those people in their communities and where they're at.
Yeah. I feel like that's a world level and also like a systems level of like what the system that we're inside of, what level of it of need does it create for the people that we feel deeply connected to and obligated to support.
Mhm.
And because of our position in the system, we're exposed to different levels, different feelings of obligation and providing right
Mhm.
there. So that actually really that really shapes it.
Mhm.
Um,
I also, part of the reason why I felt like I needed more money was so that I can have the more closely aligned relationship to the earth and the world that I want to have, right? Where I'm living at, where I am physically, like if I'm able, like how I'm able to travel, whether I'm able to like how I do laundry. What does my carbon footprint look like? It's gonna look a lot different depending on the amount of funds that I have.
what you're gonna
But
eat,
exactly, like it's
it's a
yeah,
lot.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I feel that too in a real way of like this bizarre like needing more money to feel more connected. It's weird.
Mhm,
That's
mhm.
good. That's a fun thing. Then I'll unpack that one farther because there's ways that feels true and there's ways that feels ridiculous.
Right?
All right.
But in a
Next
world
episode.
where money has become like it's a survival tool.
Yeah.
It's like that's
I
what we've
think
turned it into. I can't, it's hard
that's
to.
that's the world level of it for me on the money level, which is like anytime we're thinking about how much money we're paying ourselves and how the structure of the business is, I'm always thinking in the back of my mind, like how am I enabling the continuation of life for myself and the people around me, my like blood and chosen family in the context of the potential collapse of capitalism and increasing climate chaos. Where you talking about a paycheck, I'm thinking about a land project. I'm thinking about when I can do it and how much money is needed in order to grow food and farming and where am I going to live. And I'm thinking about, right, what am I spending now versus later versus saving? How much is in the dollar? How much is in other things in order to create safety? Because I feel like such a deep instability in the entire economic circumstance. So I'm not entirely sure,
Mhm.
right, what's going to happen. So I'm really like trying to work on using money as a way to get myself out of a money system to be
Mhm.
more connected to an earth. So it's a lot. There's a lot going on. And okay, to be super fucking for real. And while you were doing it, I was in Santa Fe and I was getting crushed by allergies. I was getting crushed by juniper allergies. Right. So, but for real, right? I was getting crushed by juniper allergies so hard that for like 3 weeks, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do anything. So it created this subtle film over me that
Mm,
was basically like, woe is me. I have to do more and work harder, and I can't feel joy, and I don't feel comfortable, and I don't feel safe, and I just have to keep working. I was also moving at the time. I'm just doing so much, doing so much. So then, in that state of consciousness, of course, somebody saying, giving me any kind of curveball is ripe for to like because of my relationship to the world at that moment, it's ripe to hit me as, oh my gosh, another thing I have to do. But who knows? Maybe if I'd been able to like inhale through my nostrils, I would have just inhaled through my nostrils and we would have just kept moving. Uh,
oh my gosh, I feel like that is a perfect transition into the all layer because I was just viscerally reminded of my fire sign energy and how I'll bring things when I feel them. And you were actually not, if I had been able to pause and actually think through the things that I know about you and the space that you were in, I would have been like, you know what? Now it's probably not really the time for this. But my fire sign energy was like
we're
literally at the
going.
very end of the meeting. By the way,
We just want a flag.
your Virgo energy is like absolutely not having it. It's like, hold on, there's a whole plan. I need details.
There's a plan. I'm doing so much right now. Like, yeah. I think on that kind of level, right? Right, just to pause and slow down and like get woo.
Should we define the all layer? I think that one is less
Yeah.
readily
So the
apparent.
all is like the cosmological, ancestral, spiritual, unseen kind of dynamics, spiritual dynamics that are happening, and not spiritual, just inside the person, but right around us. There's a lot going on that's impacting us, and I think for me, there was you just find it right because I was going through a bit of a sense of aloneness on those realms and disconnection in some ways because of the allergies actually really impacted my ability to like wake up in the morning and do a spiritual practice and connect. And I was going through this big transition in terms of moving. Right. So I was really inside of this kind of deep process and not taking the time to be able to feel held and feel supported and connected to what was going around me. I wasn't feeling like rooted in connection with the spirits of the land because I was like moving in this weird relationship to what was going on. And kind of even in a broader sense, I this is kind of between all and source, really, like not tending to my relationships with
Mm,
those entities and those beings in a way that really honored their place as kind of primary relationships in my life, primary places of support and nourishment in my life that actually make me feel in some ways more stable and grounded and whole than many human relationships. And without that there, I'm more likely to be wobbly and I'm more likely to be unstable and I'm more likely actually to be in a space of how like, oh my gosh, you or the world is asking so much more for me to give as opposed to like, oh, I feel held and I feel like I'm receiving and I'm good and there's all these things looking out for me and I'm inside of this thing and this new thing is coming up. We're chilling. I didn't have all of that online in the moment, so that made me kind
mhm,
of jostle.
mhm. Wow. That brings up a lot for me. So I feel like I was in that space of trying to reconnect to my own power and find control. Because I was in a situation where, like, I can't even, let's just say the last 4 months of my life have been some of the most, like, a lot of emotional upheaval, um, and a feeling of imbalance and also a feeling of aloneness, right? And trying to find um community that I connect with energetically, right? Um yeah. And so I was in that whole space, and my first attempt is always like, okay, we're gonna put this flag in the ground really hard. and and that's how it comes out in my fiery energy. But yeah, that's something that I was balancing and trying to get my arms around it.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think we can get really refined here just as a teaching tool of like the personal, interpersonal versus all layer, right? There's a layer in which personally I feel alone. Then there's an interpersonal layer for the humans that I'm in relationship with and how am I using it, that. And then there's a sense of that I think we're talking about now, which is on the all layer of like cosmically. Like
mhm,
I do not feel a sense, right? Like I'm looking outside right now and I can see a tree. Right.
mhm,
And I can either see that tree as outside of myself and alone that I do it, or I can like be connected with the spirit of that tree in a way that actually makes me feel rooted on the earth. That's the layer of aloneness that is happening that we're talking about on that all layer, which is different from I haven't talked to my homies in a little while. Right.
mhm.
That's an interpersonal layer. So
Yeah.
just a teaching tool.
Yes, the aloneness on the all layer for me feels like lost, like an unmooring, like just a, it's like I don't, like I'm just hurtling out in space on my own, and I need to tether.
And I think this gets us right into the source layer too, right? Because now you like again, and everything that's really slippery up here, right? Right? Because it's like there's the all layer of like there is right there. People have different ways of relating to more like animist spirits or something like that, right? That makes us feel connected. Then there's this really cosmic like place on Earth in the sphere of creation. What is going on? Am I alone, hurtling through space like that layer? And I think for me on that layer, it's really like and when you get up to that layer, you're also back inside of the personal layer, the deeply
Mhm,
personal layer. So
mhm,
for me, what was happening there is like inquiry into giving and receiving. Right?
mm,
For I have had a story that exists inside my body and my being that has been real. That's like I struggle to receive
mm,
from all from like I can eat food, but does it nourish me all the way? I can smell something, but do I actually allow it to take over me? Right? Can I actually receive nourishment from creation?
mhm,
And in some ways, my struggle to be able to receive nourishment from creation makes me then have this deficit orientation to reality.
mm,
Basically, like its story is y'all aren't giving me anything, but you're asking a lot.
mm,
Reality. Y'all aren't giving me anything, but you're asking a lot. So as soon as I'm in that relationship to creation as a whole and to source as a whole, I'm not getting, I have to give. Well, boy, am I going to be the victim all the time.
mhm,
Right? That's what you're going to say, hey, I need to make more money. And I'm going to be like, oh, you're just asking more from me. Right. Right. And it's because that's how I'm relating to literally everything
mm,
around me. So part of that, so that I'm no, I'm negotiating that. And what's interesting about that layer is like when that gets loud, it gets loud in everywhere all at the same time. All of a sudden I feel that from every relationship that I have. And I'm just looking at it. You're not giving me anything. You're asking so much. That's what I'm doing. And it was really interesting because part of my trip out of that had to be recognizing how much I do receive
Mm,
and then figuring out how to be grateful for
mhm,
what I do receive in order to open that up more. Like I wanted to receive, but ultimately I had to figure out how to give gratitude in order to open that channel. And I was like, and it was so loud in all these different places in my life. I ended up on the phone crying with my father, telling him how much I appreciated all of the things that he's given me and ways that he's been there and supported me. And partially that was because I recognized that this feeling of not of like being asked so many people asking from me without me getting whatever. It's like, oh, I feel that. Boy, I just asked for a lot of shit from my dad and never really said anything. Right. So like, whoa. Right. So I saw that and did that. And again, when we're operating on the source layer, it's like in the context of our conflict, right? It's not that my issues with creation become my issues with Tamila or like it's not, or that I work all of them out with Tamila. It's that I'm recognizing that a part of my experience of the conflict actually had, and my experience of the moment actually has everything to do with my experience of my connection with everything
mhm,
and with source and creation as a whole. So
mhm,
once I know that, then actually I'm able to like take the moment of conflict with Tamila as another layer of input that if I ride it, it'll push me into a more repair and more open heartedness with my father. So like
mhm,
that's cool,
mhm.
right? And if I get lost there, well, I'm never gonna come back and be like Tamila. So how should we delegate our roles? What are we doing actually?
My gosh. Yeah, homie. We're on some pretty big trips because my source thing was really, I think, about my own like struggle with worthiness and always feeling that like questioning, am I worthy of this? And I'm on a trip of like anchoring anchoring my worth not in the like validation or approval of others, but to source, right? Anchoring my worth in the fact that like I exist. And and then I'm a part of the the source and I come from that and we are all connected to that and that is where my intrinsic value comes from. And and having such like a fierce love and protection for that value and for myself that I can stand in it, be like, I am worthy of these things. So yes, I can request this thing and that's okay. And whether I get it or not isn't isn't a reflection on my worth, right? Um, it's a daily journey. A daily journey.
I think like right after seeing those things, you can kind of start to map out right where are the possibilities on each of these levels,
Mhm,
right? So it's this moment of right that moment of you being like, I need to make more money actually wasn't right. Part of it is organizationally. What's the decision that we're going to make in order to do this so that personally I can have more stability, right? Part of it is that. But there's also something in there that is like, how can I use this to repair my relationship with source by affirming my essential worth and separating that from the response? Like, that's what I'm doing here,
mhm,
right? And you get to do that. And so there's a resource repair that's happening because there was something that was out of whack there. And
mhm,
then on the all layers, like, okay, and how do we need to lean more into a sense of belonging with all of the cosmic beings here around us in order to anchor that? And ideologically, what are our ways of orienting that are serving us versus not serving us? And how do we need to tinker in order to be able to make this work systemically? Like, we know we can't change the system right now, but how are we setting ourselves up to be able to change the system? And how much of the attention are we paying right now to do it? Okay, organ. And then we got down to like, and interpersonally, I think there wasn't a lot. of juice. Like it's like, oh, cool, that was a weird conversation. How do you feel? Oh, okay, we're moving on, right? And then personally, it was like, did you eat? Cool, you ate. You're chilling now. We're back. Like we actually there wasn't that much
Mhm.
there, right? A little bit of personal awareness stuff, a little bit of like kind of rupture repair. It's fine, but on the organizational layer, it's like, oh, what's the shift, right? What is the shift in the financial model and the business model, and then what's the shift in the power model? And then that's where we kind of look back again to power, belonging, and justice through all the layers. It's like, how do we need to share power? Who needs to be exerting what level of agency over what in order to allow this to work? And how does our role here need to support that exercise of agency such that we can have new outcomes? So we started to focus on that, and then can see that like that question is deeper than how much are you getting paid,
Mhm.
right? Because how much are you getting paid? Cool, we'll figure that out. But the fact that we're able to understand, it's like, no, how are you being in your how do you have enough belonging to be able to take risks in your exercise of power such to reestablish your relationship inside of the organization, to change it and to start negotiating your relationship with source as a vehicle, as a one of the things that are happening? How do we establish that? It's like, oh, you're going to get somewhere cooler at the
Mhm.
end of that inquiry than you're going to get at how much money. But of course you can't circumvent, well, we got to figure out the money, right? And I think that's the juice of like that conflict moment. It's like we haven't figured out the money question yet,
Mhm.
but we have located the generative direction of the conflict. We have listened enough to understand that it's pointing us to a different arrangement of power and belonging to pursue justice in a different way. And we're going toward that, and the money thing will resolve itself as we go.
And now that you've put it like that, I feel like our what we came to is actually such a beautiful, I don't know if I would call it resolution, but a beautiful outcome in that moment of, because what I feel like we've done is put the agency to answering the question of how much I can get paid more and when in my hands, right? And thinking about that through what what am I passionate about? What are my contributions? What's the thing that we've always said that I was going to do with the organization, and let's just make sure that like I feel empowered to do that. And that I am giving that my time and focus, as well as the things that like you are in charge of moving, right? And so that to me, I think, like, I'm excited about creating, um, our podcast and different revenue streams, and, like, my passion really coming out in that way, and and I feel like it does heal those, like, all and source layers for me to, like, find a sense of, like, worthiness and my own agency in doing those things and figuring out what the answer is in partnership together.
Yeah. Podcast coming soon. Um, but you want to talk, I think there's something cool there too. This is a final thought about like to come back to the race, class, gender
Mhm,
thing. Because I think we often talk about that we don't center it as much.
mhm,
And I think it's we don't center it in some ways because I think we're checking for it subconsciously quickly all the time. Like you were like, and then I had, I got more power. And when you even here, where you were like, and then I got more agent, we put more agency in my hands to be able to do it. I quickly went, did we just respond to somebody asking for money with making them have to do more work? I like did that. I was like, did we? Okay, no, 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 no. That's that analysis is real, but doesn't apply here, right? I like we're doing it a lot, and I
mhm,
also wonder if like there's anything you want to say about something I experienced in our the way we do race, class, gender identity, which is it seems like we're connecting actually and responding to something deeper in each other than that,
mhm,
right? It's because where we came up with is like, wait, we didn't come up with you're black and have more dependence in a racialized capitalism, therefore make more money.
mhm,
We didn't come up with that,
mhm,
right? We actually came up with independent of race, class, or gender, maybe connected to it in some way. There are things that make you come alive. that are feel like more essential aspects of your soul and your creativity, and how do we create a forum to support your expression and exploration of those things given race, class, gender, etc. Like, how do we do that? And I think that's something that we exchange back and forth that's like allows us to laugh about the race.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I feel seen. Like me doing the podcast was your idea, but it was you referencing back to the thing that I've clearly been trying to build for years in different like iterations. Like you saw that, you see my talent in that space, my passion for it. And like that made me feel so seen
Yeah.
um and and appreciated.
Yeah. And I think that's also what creates safety for me too, with the way that you see me. Right. You don't reflect silly white guy shit that I do unless that's really necessary to do. But you're more like you are a heart and soul that
Mhm.
is navigating this experience of being a white guy. And these are things that you love to do. So you're able to differentiate, like, and some of the times I like to talk about stuff and create big stuff, right? But you're not like, oh, another white guy talking about stuff. It's like, oh, that's Simon. And he's trying to learn how to do that well as a white dude. All right, cool. How
Mhm.
do we do it? And I think that layer enables us to kind of keep rocking. And I think in some ways, like the core of, again, to bring it all the way back to kind of like conflict resilience, right? So the course that we're teaching is building conflict resilient organizations. So how do you hit a moment of disruption or discord where there's some level of friction, or people are collapsing, people are freezing, you're not focused on the right kind of thing, on the thing that you really want to focus on, things are being left unsaid, things don't feel right, that there's like a moment of conflict. How do you prepare yourself with resilience practices? So do the things that tend to the underlying dynamics that create that before it even happens. How do you do that so when that thing emerges, you can engage it well? And by engage, we mean meet it intentionally to unlock the possibility inside of it and continue functioning in its presence. So here it's like we haven't totally resolved it, but we're continuing to function in
Mhm.
its presence,
Mhm.
and we're engaging it. What is the possibility here? It has something to do with money, but it also has something to do with like our journeys of becoming on earth. There's something there. So the course is like, how do you do all of that so that you can most effectively do what Tamila and I are describing here, which is like, it was weird for a second, right? It was weird for a second. And it's the kind of conversation that if we didn't have the tools, could have spiraled, right? It could have gotten like hot really fast, and then we could have broken down. Like that's a thing. And organizations collapse around a conversation about money. People get into all sorts of stuff. But some of our resilience tools is what we just modeled, which is like we are aware that all of these things are happening. We weren't aware of all of the nuance until we just unpacked it. But we're aware something's happening for me personally, something's happening for me interpersonally, something's happening organizationally, something's happening systemically, ideologically, on a world layer, on an all layer, on a source layer. It's all happening.
Something
All
to
of
do with
it
our belonging and justice as well. Mhm.
has something to do with power and belonging and justice. What are we going to do? Where do we need to focus, and where do we need to align, and what do we need to focus on at what time? So that allows us to be like, cool, how much do I need to go inside myself and repair something? How much do I need to repair in a person or personal dynamic? How much do I need to make this about class? How much do I need to make this about business development? How much do I need to make this about the spirits of the trees? Like, what is the thing to focus on right now? And then bringing it back to be able to get to a space where you're generatively solving, identifying this possibility and unlocking it. So our course right now, these 4 sessions, is like on an organizational layer. How do you build that infrastructure to be able to do that as a group and as a team really swiftly and fluidly? Then we're going to do another, and that's 4 sessions. And then we're going to do another course that's on tools, specific moments, like in one-on-one conflicts. How do you self-reflect before entering a conversation like this? What do you do when you know that you need to solve the question about, say, money, but you keep talking about all this other stuff instead of actually getting to the point of solving the question? What do you do in these particular circumstances? That's the course 2. And then course 3 is like, great. You could probably tell Tamila and I have a very particular, like, kind of a cosmological orientation right now, right? We just kind of come out able to just have this conversation, right? There's particular things that we're aware of, that we're tracking in ourselves, particular intentions that we're carrying, ways of perceiving reality that we think open up the set of possibilities. So we're going to talk really specifically about that in course number 3. Oh my gosh, did we pitch it well enough? Are you so excited? Are you like, oh, I can't wait to hear these people talk about their drama?
It's like a reality show in a course.
The reality show and a
I mean,
course
so get some
and our therapy session, apparently.
yeah, that
It's
was
us.
really nice. Got
Yeah,
that.
we did it. We
Mhm.
unpacked it. And getting meta here. This thing that we just did, we would call this a conflict debrief, which is one of the resilience practices that we're going to be talking about in our session 2 of the conflict resilient organizations course, which is after something happens, right? Do you take the time to just be like, what just occurred? Right? We didn't actually need to do this to repair, but now there's more spaciousness, there's more connection here, there's more things that we can reference, and ideally we're building trust in each other of like, oh, you're aware of those, I'm aware of this, we're moving with these worlds together and figuring that, and that'll allow us the next time where we argue or have a conflict. Which, do you have a schedule? When's the next time we're going to meet? Tomorrow?
Yeah,
12:30?
we're
You want to,
tomorrow.
do we
We're
have a
gonna have
conflict
a
at
conflict
12?
tomorrow.
Well,
I
actually,
knew.
Actually, I feel like it's right after we wrap this when we talk about preparing for Monday. Oh, no, we'll prepare for Monday on Friday. Cool. So I'll see you on Friday for our next conflict.
Fabulous. Looking forward to it.